Now, it's very important how you put the stitches back on the needles if you have to remove them, because you don't want the stitches to be twisted, because that will show up in your pattern. So let's take a close-up look at some of these, at your stitches before we get started, so you can see how they need to go back on. If you look at a stitch, let me get this close enough, it has two legs. It has a front leg, which is this portion of the stitch, and then there is the back leg, which is the back portion of that loop of the stitch. You always want the part that is in the front to be the right side. So if I stretch this down, so you can hopefully see it really well. There, you can see that there's two legs. You can see the one in the front, which is here, and the one in the back, which is right here. The one that always is in the front, when you put them back on the needles, should be on the right. So you don't want this back loop to be in the front. So now let's rip some stitches off of the needles, and I will show you what it looks like to put them back on again. Okay, I have some that I've taken off, and let's just imagine that I've had to unravel a row, and now I'm going to try to put them back onto my needle. So here's what's left on my needle. I'm going to pick up these stitches, but I want to make sure that I get the front portion will be the right leg. So I want to thread them back on a little at a time. You can use a crochet hook if that's easier for you, because sometimes they will tend to slip out a little bit. But you just want to make sure you don't twist stitches. So here you can see I'm picking it up. You can see the front loop and the back loop here. This front loop is going to be on the right. So I want to put it in like that so that the front leg is facing to on the right. Here's the next one. And it will be the same whether you are knitting or purling. In fact, I have a purl stitch here coming up. Here it is right here. There is my purl stitch, and you can see there's the front and the back, or here's the two legs of the stitch. This one you want on the back. This is the one that you want facing towards the front. And you're just going to continue on across that way, but that puts them on so that the stitches are not twisted, and you can continue knitting at that point. Say I'm only a short distance into my yarn or into my row, and I've made a mistake, maybe back just a few stitches here. It's not worth taking it off the needles and ripping it out. We're just going to unknit or tink, this, which is the word knit backwards. We're just going to tink those couple of stitches back. Now the way you can do that, because you don't want to twist your stitches, I would have been knitting this direction, and my error would have been over in here. Because I was on a purl side at the time, and here's my yarn on the right hand side. I'm going to turn my work so that now my yarn is going the opposite direction. So it's now on my left. I'm going to take my right needle. I'm going to go in through the back. Don't go in through the front or it will twist your stitches. Go in through the back, right into the stitch prior, right here. Pick it up on your needle and slide it off the left needle. I'll do it again. You go in through the back, pick up that loop, slide it off the needle, and pull the yarn out. Go in through the back, slide it off your needle, and pull the yarn out. And you can see that my stitches have stayed in order. My right leg of the stitch is still facing forward. And when I finish that, I can just turn my work around and pick back up where I left off with my knitting. Now let's say I get to the end of a row and I realize that I either have one too many or one too few stitches. Now if you are knitting in pattern, you can't do this, but if you are only knitting in stockinette or garter, then you can. First let's do as if I have one too many stitches. Now let's say I've knit all the way across my work. I'm down to my last 2 stitches, so I've decided to count to make sure I'm right. And I've discovered that I am 1 stitch too many. So am I going to rip the entire thing out? I could, but the easiest thing would be just to simply knit the last 2 stitches together. It's not going to be that noticeable if it's only a one-time occurrence. If you're 4 or 5 stitches, yeah, I wouldn't do that, but if it's only an extra stitch, knit the 2 stitches together, and you can see it's really not noticeable that I've even done that. Now let's say I've knit all the way across. I'm down to my last 2 stitches, and I've decided to count and realized I am going to be 1 stitch too short, that I need to add a stitch. Again, I'm not going to rip the whole thing out. I'm just going to make a stitch. Now the way you can do that, there is a make a stitch left and a make a stitch right. It really doesn't matter which one you do if you're just adding a stitch. Making a stitch left or right is used in a pattern. It causes a stitch to slant. It adds a stitch and it causes it to slant to the left or the right. But if you're just trying to correct a mistake, it really doesn't matter because you're only going to be doing it one time. So what you would do, let's get to the next to the last stitch. Now you can see this little like bridge right here between your stitches. You pick that up with your left needle. Now I'm going to be going in through the front, so I'm going to go in through the front, pick that loop up so it's hitting here. You don't want to just simply knit this because it will act like a yarn over. It would create a hole right in your work, and you don't want that to happen. But you're going to pick this up and then you're going to twist the stitch. Instead of knitting in through the front, you're going to actually knit that back leg of the stitch. So remember I talked about stitches having a front and a back leg. Here's that front stitch for the front leg. Here's the back leg. You're going to go in through the back leg and pick it up. You can see me right here, I've picked it up. and then just knit it as you normally would. But you can see right here, it has actually twisted the stitch. See where it crisscrosses? That kind of fills the hole in a little bit. And then by the time you knit your next stitch, I've added a stitch, but it really doesn't show. It doesn't create a whole lot of a hole. And it's just a simple, easy fix, but you've added an extra stitch by doing so. So let me show you that stitch one more time. You're just picking up from the row below this little like bridge stitch. It's just a little like a cable that runs between. It's just the yarn that runs from between the two stitches from the row before. Pick it up from the front, so it's on your left needle. Use your right needle and go in through the back stitch right there. There you can see I've done that. Then knit it as normal, but you can see right here that the stitch has been twisted. And then knit your last stitch. And that's what it looks like. The first mistake we are going to show how to fix is a dropped stitch if you are doing garter stitch. Now, as you can see, garter stitch has ridges, but if you open it up a little bit right here, you can see that there is stockinette in between the ridges. This will play a part in which direction you pick up the stitches if you drop one. So I have intentionally dropped a stitch over here. So you can see the dropped stitch is sitting right here. So I have about 4 rows that I need to pick up. You can tell that by the number of ladders or strands that are coming across here. Now to pick it up, there are specialized tools that you can use, but you don't have to. I don't own anything special. I just have a plain old crochet hook. So what you're going to do, first I'm going to move this so I don't end up dropping any additional stitches. You can see my dropped stitch right here. Now I look at where this next ladder is, and you can see that that is part of a ridge stitch. If I go in through the front like this and pick it up, you can see it's going to look like a stockinette. It's not going to look right. So I'm actually going to move the strand piece in front of the loop, go from behind the loop, and pull the strand through. Now you can see that that first strand right here, now you can see that this stitch that I picked up matches the rest of the garter ridge. So my next stitch is going to, that I pick up, is going to look like the stockinette, because you can see when I open this up that this is stockinette right here. So in this case, I will take the loop. You want to make sure that your stitch is straight, that you don't twist it around. And for the next strand going across, you're going to place the strand behind the loop and pull it through towards the forward side. So here you can see that it looks like a stockinette stitch. You can see it right there, and that matches the stockinette that is in between the rows right here. Next we have a ridge again in our garter stitch. So again, we are going to move the stranded piece in front of the loop, place the crochet hook through the loop from behind, and then pull the strand through. And you can see there I have it looks like a purl stitch, but that is what we're going to use for this garter. And you can see that again with the garter ridge. And then we have our last stitch to pick back up, and it would be a stockinette stitch. And the loop will be in the front, and I will pull the strand through the back And now I'm going to slide it back onto the needle. Like that. And you can see it looks just like the rest of the stockinette stitches. And then I would go ahead and knit all the way across the rest of the way. So that's how you fix a dropped stitch when you have a garter, when you're knitting in garter stitch. Next, I'll be showing you how to pick up a dropped stitch if you're doing stockinette. Now let's say you have dropped a stitch and you are in the stockinette. So I've pulled some stitches out to show you. Again, you're going to use a crochet hook. You're going to pick up this loop where it left off, where it's dropped. You're going to pick up the next stitch in the ladder right here. You're going to grab this loop and pull it through the front like that. Now you're going to remove your crochet hook and put it again through the front. With stockinette, you're always going to go through the front so that it'll look like the rest of the stitches. And you're going to pick up the next ladder here, pull it through that loop. There you can see it. Again, move your crochet hook back through the front, pick up the next stitch or ladder, pull it through, move your crochet hook again through the front, picking up the next stitch, and there it is. And then you can just slide it right back onto your needle. So there you have fixed your stockinette if you've dropped a stitch.